You are listening to Nerd Best Friends, a podcast that covers the nerdy conversations you're already having, or wish you could. It's the nerdiest thing you'll do this week.
Welcome back to the Nerd Best Friends podcast. I am Analese, and I am here with my best friend, Rob.
Hey, it's me, your best friend, your podcast host, your tight-wearing, never-swearing comic book superhero.
The Nerd Best Friends podcast can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and more. Subscribe and follow us now. If you'd like to support our podcast and help us pay our bills, find us on Venmo or clip on Tip Jar on our website, nerdbestfriends.com. This is season 2, episode 29, and today we're going to discuss our favorite superhero comic books. But first, Rob's recommendations.
This week, I'm going to recommend something that is available for streaming on HBO Plus, HBOMax, HBO Now, HBO, whatever they call it. And this is the series His Dark Materials. His Dark Materials is a series based on a novel series by Philip Pullman, the series of the same name. You may have heard it, if you hadn't heard it before, with The Golden Compass. The Golden Compass is book 1 in that series. It's also the thing that's been most adapted or tried to have been adapted over time. It's been a graphic novel. There was a movie starring Nicole Kidman that came out at one time that was pretty good and was meant to be a trilogy, but it didn't make enough money, I guess, to do the other two. So it always kind of left us hanging. Now this HBO series has rekindled interest in this book. It takes place in another universe where people's souls are on the outside and they take the form of animals. And it's just very cool, very fantasy, very kind of steampunky. This series in particular does an excellent job of adapting those novels into, and I don't want to say easy to understand, but boy, did the visuals help with the allegories and stuff that the book touched on. It was always very much challenging to the religious status quo and the authority that, say, like Catholicism and things bring was always kind of the point of the novel series. And to see the way that they do that with the visuals and the dichotomies and the hypocrisies is really cool to watch. It's got some great child acting in it, as well as some really dramatic moments, super cool special effects. All the little talking animals and stuff look great. And it is just weaving a story. It's in the 3rd season now, which I believe is mirroring the 3rd book. So it should be coming to an end. It's probably got a few episodes left in the series, or maybe by the time this comes out, it'll be all wrapped up. So it's a great time to check it out. It's just super fun. I've always loved that novel series, and I was excited to see the streaming series, and dang, if it isn't good.
I have the HBO Max Plus stream, and I have not seen this come by my recommendations, so I'm going to have to. It sounds really good.
It's super cool. I think you'd like it a lot just because it's just different, right? It's not like anything else that, comes up. It's really cool. And Lin-Manuel Miranda is in it. Spoiler alert.
He's in it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Good.
He plays a super cool character. He's like a cowboy character, but his profession is like balloonist. He flies a hot air balloon. He's a hot air balloon flying captain, and his demon or his soul that lives on the outside is a jackrabbit named Hester. It's amazing.
Whoa.
Right? Like, if that doesn't get you in, I don't know what will. Nerd mail.
I didn't know if you had anything.
For nerd mail, I will say that I'm not angry, listeners. I'm just disappointed. Remember, our call to action at the beginning of the year is share your goals with us. I've been trying to put my stuff up on there as I finish so that you can follow that hashtag and see what I'm doing. And again, we just want to build that community. So it could be anything. It could be like, oh, you know what? I finally sleeved these cards from this board game that I got. Throw up a picture, hashtag 2023 Nerd Goals. We want to see your stuff so that we can laud you and applaud you on all of the great things that you're doing in your nerdy life. How about you, Analese? Any nerd mail?
Yeah, we've received a lot on all of our platforms. A lot of people are sharing their nerd things with us, which is pretty cool. So no questions or comments on episodes. I can't tell you how many links to The Last of Us we have received in the past few weeks. Are you nerds watching this show? I have not started it yet. Have you started that show yet, Rob?
No, Maria has, and she likes it a lot. Everybody at work is talking about it, all that kind of stuff. I got to get through some stuff that I'm backlogged on. You know, it's one of those things that kind of goes on the list. But Last of Us is based on the video game of the same name, The Last of Us, which people absolutely adored. And, you know, it's always hoisted up as one of the great examples of how to tell a story in video games that's, you know, dramatic and meaningful. And from what I understand, like, it has adapted very well to the way they're doing it on that show.
We've had a ton of people just send us links. Like, we got to know if you're watching the show. So listeners, right now we're not, but we'll both catch up.
It was kind of funny because everybody was talking about it, and Maria had been like, oh, I'm looking for something else to watch. Have you heard of anything good? And I said, oh yeah, The Last of Us. Check that out. And so she was watching it, and she was sitting over on the other side of the room, and she just looks at me. She's like, oh, this is a zombie show. Oh, gotcha.
Yep.
But she's totally hooked.
Listener and past guest Stacy sent a link about a creepy Sesame Street short. The short story, I have to share this because it is really actually cool. Someone was, you know, on one of the platforms. I don't remember which, but he was talking about how there was this Sesame Street short that he has either made up in his head because he can't find it anywhere, or just doesn't know if anyone else remembers seeing it because it used to give him nightmares about cracks in the wall coming to life and turning into animals and stuff like that. And it's Sesame Street, so it's not meant to be dark, but it's dark. And he talks.
It's actually Sesame Street.
It's actually a Sesame Street
not
short.
Like a Meet the Feebles parody. Or...
There's a throwback. No, it's an actual Sesame Street short. I don't know. The way the story goes is that in his mailbox, after he'd like scoured the internet and sent messages to a bunch of people about this short, a copy of it landed in his mailbox, like on a DVD or something like that. And so he watched it, and sure enough, here's this clip.
That's also extra creepy.
Yeah. And then I guess somehow, and maybe I'm getting the story wrong, like he got a fax, and if you promise not to share it, we can send it to you. Like it's some kind of urban legend at this point, but she sent a link, and it's a creepy as heck Sesame Street short called Cracks. So I'm going to share it with you off
Share this with me. I'm very skeptical.
Share it to our listeners. And it's really about these cracks in the wall that this kid like sees, and just like a kid staring into the clouds, they become little characters for him, and he daydreams himself into the cracks, and they go traveling to other cracks that look like other animals, and everyone's playing. And then there's an evil crack that's like, rah, 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 and it's creepy as heck.
There's no way that was on Sesame Street.
Just wait. I'll send you the link. It's pretty cool. But
maybe the Muppet Show.
I think it's even too dark for the Muppet Show, but it's cool. I'll send it to you, and I'll post it on our stuff.
I don't know. Was Dom DeLuise in there?
It might have been his voice. I don't know.
Then it was.
It's you can tell it's like an early, like late 70s, early 80s animation and sounds and stuff like that. I'll show it to you. I'll put it up on our stuff too. I got messages from listeners asking about Scream 6 because I talked about Scream so much. Scream 6 is coming out in March. I don't know that I'm going to watch it. Neve Campbell is not a part of it. And we all know, if you think of horror movies, all the Halloween movies without Jamie Lee Curtis are crap. And some of the ones with her are crap too. But
they made Halloween movies without Jamie Lee Curtis?
They did, a whole bunch of them. But yeah, there's a ton where she's, her character, Laurie, is not the main character. And that's kind of what they're doing with Scream now, because Neve Campbell wanted her money and they said no. So I'm a little conflicted. Do I watch it without Neve Campbell? I don't know. And finally, I don't know if this is nerd mail, but you
don't know if you got something in the mail or not?
I can't remember if it's something I saw or something I was sent at this point. But after our cosplay episode, I came across, whether it was sent to me or I found it, I came across the YouTube videos of Allison at LA Comic Con walking across the stage. Mm-hmm. I watched when they announced her as the winner. Mm-hmm. The winner is cool. Like, she gets to come out and hold this big, gigantic check. I still have no idea how she's seen through that costume or how she knows where to navigate. I'm also going to post this to our stuff. You need to see the crowd, like, literally is in awe. Mm-hmm. This costume comes out, and all of a sudden all the cell phone cameras come up, and the crowd is it's that tense, excited hush. And applause at the same time where people just can't believe what it is they're seeing. Like, it becomes very obvious if you watch the few before her and the few after her that like Allison is the clear winner. And it's really cool to see this like reaction from the crowd when this 8-foot costume, this 8-foot Urskek comes out and they're like, whoa. Like, you could just
super
tell.
cool. You did share that video with me. I think you texted it to me and I was checking it out. And like video does a better job of showing the majesty of it than the photos do, because you get to really see the height and the stature of it. Very cool.
I think someone sent it to me. I don't quite remember, but at some point I came across it and shared it with you. But lots of interactions with our stuff, even if it's not directly about the episodes. Just keep it coming, listeners. With that being said, we are, what would you say, Rob, complimenting our non-superhero comic book episode from season 1, flipping the script and talking about superheroes this time? Is that a fair
absolutely.
assessment?
I mean, it almost is like we got to backtrack a little bit. You know, there's an assumption that, well, if everybody listening to this podcast is a nerd, then they must already be reading comic books. And if they're already reading comic books, then they must be reading superhero comic books. So if we want to talk about something new and interesting to this audience, we should talk about non-superhero comic books, because that's a little bit further off the beaten path. But you know what? Why take anything for granted? And also, why not highlight some of the fun things that are happening with superheroes? Superheroes are great!
Agreed. And to do this episode, we decided to bring back everyone's favorite teen. Welcome back, Andrew.
It has been another time skip since I've last been on the episode. Now I have my hair. It got longer, but now it's in like a cool undercut. I have a metal arm, and
and a red leg.
I no longer want to continue my fight against evil. I just want to go to my farm and retire with my wife / dog / children / bottle of whiskey, because I'm getting too old for this, Jennifer.
You're also not blonde. I guess I'll just throw that in there. Last time you were on the show, you were blonde.
How would anyone listening know that?
They don't. That's why I said it.
Oh.
It's because I was dumber last episode.
Impossible.
What have you been up to since the last time you were on the show, Andrew?
I turned 14 and I decided that I was gonna be rebellious. So now I go to school and I wear my leather jacket and my Wisdom Through Pain t-shirt with the Grim Reaper and roses on it. I go to school and I go and I sit down and I put my feet up and I say, "What's up, teach?" That's basically all I've just been doing that for a few months now.
That sounds solid.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that's going well for you.
I can't drive a motorcycle yet, but I'm getting there.
I wish you luck in your endeavors.
So Andrew is here to talk to us about superhero comics. And so it was tough, but we kind of came up with our top 3. What I noticed as I looked through the notes and we started filling in our document like we do every week before the podcast, or every couple weeks before the podcast, is this list just happens to line up with a lot of popular movies and shows that have come out in the last few years. So I think we're on the same page as far as, you know, what makes a good superhero story, because these stories that we're about to list for you happen to be the influence for a lot of really cool stuff that's going on screen right now. And it's just serendipity. This is going to serve as both a cool place for you to get some ideas for some cool comics. If you have seen some of the movie and TV stuff that this stuff influenced, then it gives you a place to go back to and see where that original influence came from. Maybe you think you do like superheroes, but you're not super into trying to keep up with all the continuity of all these TV shows and movies. You can get it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, which is these influential comic books. So it just happened to work out that way. It's also kind of reassuring to those of us who are fans of the genre that, yeah, the people making these movies and the people making these shows, they're picking the right stuff.
We did a little bit of a change up to how we approach this episode. Our previous lists episodes, comic book episodes, we've been framing as a top 5 or a top 8 or top 20, our favorite. In this case, we're just talking about superhero comics featuring superheroes. So for me, I don't know that I'm necessarily listing my favorite, but the feminist in me felt compelled to bring up all female superheroes, as few and far between as they are. I've enjoyed the 3 that I put on my list very much. And you are right, Rob. All 3 of them have been very recent in movies, films, and series, whether their own or as part of others. I do think that helped us come to some of these conclusions and bring up some of these comics that are now much more in popular media right now to kind of frame the superheroes we want to highlight through comics. The first comic book on my list is The Legend of Wonder Woman, Volume 1 from 2016. So what I find funny about all three of the comics or comic superheroes that I picked, they all originate in the 60s. Our society has developed and changed a lot since the 60s. From simple things, what women can say and how they're perceived in society has been able to be adapted in the different iterations of these female superheroes over the course of time. And what I really like about this Legend of Wonder Woman from 2016 is Diana, who is the Amazon, the princess of the Amazons. She is much more blunt in America than she would have been in the 60s when when her first appearance, volume 1, came out. And I'll give you an example. She walks around with another female character that...
Candy, come on.
Is it Andy?
Candy.
Candy? It might be Candy. She walks around and makes comments. Why do women wear all these makeup? What are you hiding from? What's that mask? And she really sheds a light on the fact that women hide behind a mask instead of being strong, independent women. That is not a tone you would have heard in 1960s, 1970s, even 1980s. So I really appreciate this updated version of Diana and Wonder Woman in the 40s, right? It's still timepieced in the 40s, but she is much more real of a woman that would come from the Amazons than the original Wonder Woman. And that's what I appreciate about the series.
Wonder Woman's always going to be a fish out of water story like that. And something that this book, like you were explaining, does right is you can use the fish out of water story to make commentary on society, which is exactly what you just described. That's where things like the Wonder Woman TV show or the Wonder Woman movie fails, because it uses those fish out of water comments to be cute or silly instead of anything meaningful. Andrew, have you read this book?
I have not.
Okay, I have read this book as well, and I like it for a whole host of reasons, but I think the number one thing that sticks out to this book when I'm remembering it is the art. The art is different. It is gorgeous. This book spends a lot of time in Themyscira, where the Amazons live, with absolutely beautiful fantasy layouts and creatures and situations, and just absolutely beautiful double-page spreads and scenes with lush, vibrant, like saturated colors to show visually the difference between that world and man's world. I believe this one also just has a host of animals everywhere. Yes. In Themyscira, there's just beautifully drawn animals. I remember the kangaroo character as part of Wonder Woman lore being in this book. And then I believe there's another part when she is on Earth and she's, I think, in a prison or something, gazing out the window, and then all of a sudden animals from the forest start coming and gathering around her, just the same as they would do there. You see the difference between, again, beautifully drawn, but in our Earth, animals are grays and browns and lots of earth shades, and still beautiful and still wonderful, but in contrast to the purples and yellows and pinks and blues of the animals in the other world. Really, really cool visuals for this book as well.
Definitely that. And you're right. You know, the recent movies and even television show with Wonder Woman they do focus on the fact that she's different, right? She's gorgeous. She's stronger than an average female walking around. There's all these, you're different. This one, the tone of it is just, from Diana's point of view, I'm not different, you're different, right? And that's an inner strength of Wonder Woman that I think is just, like, Linda Carter is amazing as Wonder Woman in the series growing up, but she's not allowed to portray as a strong woman. She's a little meek when she's Diana and in disguise, right? She tries to be the helpless woman.
The Superman, like Clark Kent, would act like, meek and kind of clumsy and stuff to hide his Superman identity. They tried to repeat that, but just a girl. It wasn't the Wonder Woman character, where I think you're absolutely right on this book. It has that inner strength of like, well, I'm right.
Yeah. I'm strong, I'm right, and I'm not ashamed of it. Doesn't come out as strong. I think Gal Gadot does a pretty good job of it, but it's just not a great written series of movies for Wonder Woman, but she portrays a little bit of that, and I think probably hinted from this comic book, that kind of inner strength of, I'm not the weird one here. That's what I really, really liked about this version. What do you got, Rob? What's the first one on your list?
First one on my list is one of the comic books, or the rare comic books that I have read 2 or 3 times all the way through because I enjoy it so much. Also a recent film adaptation, and this is Thor, God of Thunder, Volume 1, The God Butcher. I also enjoy Volume 2, which is a follow-up with the same characters, which is Volume 2 is called God Bomb. These are by Isad Ribic, and they came out in 2013. This story is everything I want in a Thor comic book. It's got a little bit of time travel in it, so there's 3 versions of Thor. There's young Thor before he gets Mjolnir, and he's just reckless and drunk all the time and hungry for adventure. There's the kind of straight down the middle Avengers Thor that we know, who is, you know, thee and thou and honor and has a job to do, and he's very much a hero. And then there's old Thor from the future that is just this one-eyed, haggard old man that looks like Odin sitting on his throne in Asgard, you know, the dead city, because all the gods have been slain by this unstoppable evil force. And the evil force, this God Butcher, becomes this like interesting 3-dimensional character where we understand his reasons. His story is tragic in a way that is very understandable. Right? He came from a world that was in just dire drought and heat and desolate. He wandered with his tribe throughout the lands they all had faith that the gods would save them. If they could just get to, you know, if they just kept going and they kept praying and they had faith that the gods would save them. And as he holds his dying child in his arms, as she starves and is dehydrated to death, why would the gods do this? And just creates this hatred for the gods. And of course, in this Thor world, there's thousands and millions of gods all over the place. And when he discovers this and the opulence in which they live and the things that they do, he's filled with this hatred to kill the gods. And a world without gods is a universe without gods is a better universe. And he goes and he gets the power to do that. Ooh, I just absolutely love it. It's such a cool book. And space whales.
You gotta have space whales.
That just changes the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
The series is The God of Thunder, or is that the first volume?
So the series is The God of Thunder.
Okay.
Volume 1 and 2 deal with, what's his name?
Gore,
the God Butcher. While Volume 1 is a complete story, you don't get the resolution to Gore until I think the end of Volume 2.
God of Thunder is the title of Thor 4, right? Is this
Thor 4 is called Love and Thunder.
Love and Thunder. Okay, that's where I am mistaken. Okay.
But it is that story. That the Love and Thunder movie is based on this series, this Volume 1, and the bad guy, and that is Gore, the God Butcher.
Oh.
You and me had to fight tooth and nail over who got to talk about the God Butcher.
So what you're saying, Andrew, is this could have been on your list as well?
Yeah, I read it actually recently, and it's really good. In fact, we came up with a lot of the ones on both of our lists together, and then had to go like, all right, well, you can get that one, you can get that one, but I want Thor. No, I'm going to talk about Thor.
What did you get instead?
I got to talk about Moon Knight. Moon Knight's so cool, you guys. He has a lot of runs, and they're all just called Moon Knight, so it's impossible to tell them apart. But the one I'm talking about is written by a guy named Jeff Lemire. It's the first 3 volumes are issues 1 through 14, and then it goes from 14 to like 298.
Oh, they do that.
They do that a ton, but you don't need to do all that. Just go from 1 through 14. These were released from 2016 to 2017. And Jeff Lemire, what he does in this book is he decides to explore the character of Moon Knight and like really get in there and figure out what's he all about, what makes him tick. The premise is that, in issue 1, Mark Spector wakes up in an insane asylum, and the doctors there tell him that Moon Knight was never real, and that his father checked him in to the institute when he was a child for his DID, and he has just been imagining these superhero adventures this whole time. But Mark Spector knows the truth. When he takes the pen and rips up the white asylum sheets to make the Moon Knight cowl. And when he puts on the mask, he sees that this whole asylum's fake. It actually exists in like the void outside of reality created by the Egyptian god Ammit in order to contain him and separate him from his god Khonshu. And he needs to escape out into the real world. And what I think that Moon Knight does as a character with his blend of like weird magic and mysticism, and also the fact that he's bonkers, is that when you put him together, it's intentionally very vague. You don't know what is real. And I think that works very well in a comic, because in comic books, so much is left up to interpretation. Just like with the way it's delivered, with the panel layouts, your mind is supposed to fill in the blank. So when you're reading this run, what it does is it asks you the question. It says, well, what do you think makes more sense? Do you think he's insane and he's surviving these impossible situations just because like he's so lucky that he can make it through these impossible odds? Or do you think that it's all real and that there are these ancient, they're kind of Lovecraftian almost deities that are controlling reality, and he is the fist of Khonshu? What makes more sense to you? This whole story is beautifully done. It weaves in everything that's part of Moon Knight. It's esoteric, it's weird, deals with like his mental health and how that affects the character and his different alters. It's very, very good. This is Moon Knight by Jeff Lemire.
I think the best thing about Moon Knight is when you don't know what is real and what is in Mark Spector's head. And it sounds like this really leans into that.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And I think sometimes they even, like you were saying, like it poses the question to the reader. Sometimes they put that question right on the page to kind of help the reader along. And you'll be reading the Moon Knight and somebody will be asking him, be like, well, what do you think is more real, Mark? That you're in an insane asylum right now? Or that you are a superhero that fights invisible ancient Egyptian monsters in the streets every night? And it's like, well, when you put it that way, yeah, he's probably just crazy, but I'm reading the book and it's cool. And those are the best Moon Knight comics. I think when Moon Knight was popular in the 90s, they did the classic Marvel thing with trying to make crossovers, right?
Right.
Like, oh, we'll put Spider-Man on the cover because that'll sell more books. And we'll make Moon Knight, crossover with the Avengers and have some fun adventures. But what that does is grounds that character in the reality of the universe. And Moon Knight is definitely a character that operates much better off to the side in his own thing, so that you have those questions of what's real and it can be its own separate thing. As soon as he's up there doing stuff and Spider-Man shows up like wisecracking, you're like, oh, well, this is really happening because in the Marvel universe, there's a Spider-Man. And so now they're teaming up on adventures. It takes all the illusion of Moon Knight away.
Kind of like how you hinted at the start, the new Moon Knight show on Disney Plus draws a lot of settings and like looks from this book, but it doesn't do the same thing. And the Moon Knight show, by the end of the show, you're pretty convinced that this is all pretty much a real thing that happened. What that, I think, unfortunately did to the comic books is that it set that precedent, and then the comic books followed with now in the Age of Khonshu and the new Moon Knight story. It says, well, yes, Khonshu is real, and he tried to cause rebellion, and now he's locked up in Asgard. But it's all real, and it's all happened.
Right. It's all real. It's just multiple personalities that Mark Spector has, right? He has a dissociative disorder where sometimes he's the personality of Moon Knight, sometimes he's the personality of Mark Spector, sometimes he's the person of like what's the cab driver guy, Jake Lockley.
There's a ton.
He has a bunch of these different personalities that he bounces through, but in this continuity, they're all real. He's just bouncing between them, rather than this 2016 book that you're recommending where we don't know what's real.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew, didn't you get a super cool Funko with an issue of Moon Knight at
I did. I got a super cool Funko with like Moon Knight #1 when he first came out.
So the second one on my list is Captain Marvel. Now, Rob made a face, and listeners, you can't see this. When I said all three of mine originate in 1960s, Rob's like, he gave me the, I don't actually face on.
No, that was for the next one, not this one.
Oh, gotcha. Well, for this one, Captain Marvel originally was a man from the 1940s, known as Mar-Vell. Carol Danvers comes along in 1967 as a love interest to Mar-Vell. 10 years later, in that version of Captain Marvel, comes the oops thing that happens that blends their DNA and gives Carol Danvers superpowers. She becomes Captain Marvel. And I would say pretty much since then, it's pretty safe to say all iterations of Captain Marvel since the 70s have been her and centered around her. So I am talking about the more recent, in the 2010s, volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Captain Marvel, Earth's Mightiest Hero. Of course, we have the film and part of the MCU that has come out. I think she's in all 2 of the 3 phases, 2 of the 4 phases. She's in the first phase, second. I lose track of which phase is which, but she does have her own movie. She was in the end of that first phase, which was the really big one with the fist and the stones. Why am I?
Infinity War?
Thank you. It's just nice to have a female equivalent to the superhero story. Wonder Woman is Princess of the Amazon. She has superpowers when she's on Earth because she is not your average female person. Captain Marvel, in some way, shape, or form, depending on which version of it you are reading or watching, she is part of some explosion or experiment gone wrong, like a Spider-Man. I would say like a Superman, but not really because she's not an alien, but it is just a female version of, hey, I suddenly have superpowers and I am going to use them for good and be part of this thing. And she's a female superhero and the comics are entertaining. And Rob, you've used, is it a Mary Sue? She's very much a Mary Sue in the MCU universe, and agree or disagree, it is still cool to have a strong female superhero that's equatable to some of the other ones that are flying around in tights.
So the 2010 Captain Marvel is my least favorite Captain Marvel.
Of course it is.
But you said Captain Marvel, Earth's Mightiest Hero.
Yes.
Which I believe is a 2012 Captain Marvel, which was after the reboot of Captain Marvel. So do you mean Captain Marvel in the black bathing suit with the red sash around her waist? Or do you mean the Captain Marvel with like the blue and red kind of Air Force looking suit?
It's the one with the blue and red. So when I picked that, the title of the 3rd volume is Earth's Mightiest Hero. And when I look for like at the back of the comic for the first 2 volumes, they also call him Earth's Mightiest Hero, and I didn't look up the dates. So I assumed like that 2012 is the one, like volume 3 is the one I'm specifically referring to. There were 2 volumes before that. That's the first of the series of 3.
Oh, it sucks.
Well, the third part of the series is where it gets really, I think that's where the source of the movie mostly comes from, that 3rd volume. In 2012.
Gotta be when everything kind of changes and she becomes like a space police person.
Yes.
With her Air Force thing.
Yes. You're talking about this one.
That's the one.
So this is volume 3.
Aha.
This is where it gets the best. This is the one that I'm specifically referring to in my list, but there are 2 that exist before that, including the cover and the like black bathing suit that goes all the way to the origin story. By the time you get to this 3rd volume of this series, she's really out there, like you said, like a space force, being a superhero in the more traditional way the men were able to. It's no longer this, you're a woman kind of deal. It is, you are a superhero doing superhero things.
Absolutely. That one is super cool. So we were both on the same page, then skip 1 and 2 and start with 3.
You can absolutely start with 3.
Is it in that one, or then is it in 4 where they have the time travel story where she goes back with all the female pilots in World War II that are crash landed on the island?
I think that's the 4th one.
Okay,
I don't think that's this one.
Next one.
But
that
it is
super
good.
Cool as well. Yeah, no, that Captain Marvel, that's awesome. She's in space. She's got the flirting cat, everything.
Yeah. Yep.
100%. And that is where I think you're absolutely right. That's where the inspiration for that movie came from, with all of the cool stuff. Added its own Marvel Universe twist with the time travel story.
Right. And Gone, and by the time the 3rd issue comes along, Gone is the Carol Danvers who was the love interest of another, it's like born off of his rib kind of thing in the previous versions of it. And that goes away in this series.
Very cool. You've read that one, right?
I think you did make me read that one. Yeah, I liked it.
Well, I made you read it, so I guess.
Maybe I'm telling it how it is. You said you walked in to my room and you slapped my Nintendo Switch onto the ground and spat on it, and you said, "Here, son, you're gonna learn to read." Dang it!
Woo! Next one on my list is one of my favorite series, and I know one of Andrew's favorite series as well. And this is Hawkeye from 2012 by Matt Fraction and David Aja. Matt Fraction does such a wonderful job in this series, setting up Hawkeye as this is a very different Hawkeye, and it really rebooted the character from the Avengers that was the mainstream Avengers stories that were going on, where he's just kind of tired. And he's not very motivated. I think in the first issue, he's coming out of being very injured in some kind of battle that the Avengers fought. And he's just feeling like, man, why am I doing this to myself? I can't hang with the Hulk and, Iron Man and Thor, for crying out loud. My ribs are broken. My legs are broken. And so he's recovering and he's getting himself set up. And like Tony Stark is there helping him hook up his stereo system because that's his friend who knows tech. So who else are you going to call up to, and Tony Stark does it, right? Because he's a Hawkeye, and it's just really cute. He's living in this apartment building, and there's, lovable NPCs that live there. They all kind of meet up on the roof on warm summer evenings and grill and have beers. This is the story where he meets Kate Bishop, Hawkeye. It's really the origin of that character and their dynamic. I mean, it's just got such a great supporting cast. It's got grills up on the roof, grilling and serving beers. It's got Pizza Dog, and it's of course got my all-time favorite thing, the Tracksuit Mafia. The Russian guys who are like the antagonists of the story. And I love it when comics do this, where they write the words and spell the actual words on the page to mimic the thick Russian accent that these guys have. Yes. And how you can hear them. They call him Hawk Guy instead of Hawkeye because that's, aren't you the Hawk Guy? It's just adorable and funny and powerful. It's a great read. It's a fast read. The art is very different and it's very cool. And it was 100% the inspiration for the Hawkeye television series that they did. The art is great. The characters are awesome. If you watched the Hawkeye series and you thought that the Tracksuit Mafia Russian guys were hilarious, there's even more of them in the comic book, and they are equally awesome. So Hawkeye, Matt Fraction, start with volume 1. If you love it, which you will, you're just going to keep reading and reading and reading and reading. And there are even like later ones that are very Kate Bishop focused. There's a Hurricane book where it's like a 4-issue run of Kate Bishop in this hurricane and flood and trying to get from point A to point B, but having to help all these people along the way builds her up. I would argue the main character is really Kate Bishop, and she is spot on. Pizza Dog is spot on. The Tracksuit Mafia is incredible. Like the story, the art style, everything is there in influence from this book. They make a great companion. Whichever one you read or watch first, like if you watch the Hawkeye one and you're like, oh, that was really fun, read this book. You're going to absolutely love it. And then vice versa. If you're thinking like, oh, I'm more of a comic book guy, I don't like watch all these shows and stuff. If you read this comic and love it, you're going to like find all the Easter eggs of the things that they do in the series and just be delighted that they grabbed those diamonds from the book and stuck them in the very popular series.
Also, shout out to Jeremy Renner, who's still recovering from pretty major snowmobile accident.
It's like Reno or something, right?
Yeah, he's on the California side, I think, of Lake Tahoe.
Gotcha.
I don't think he's on the Vegas side. I think he's on the California side of Lake Tahoe and had a pretty gnarly snowplow accident.
Snowplow, yeah. Shout out to a real one. He was going across to help his neighbor get unburied from some huge snow, and that's how he had this accident. And absolutely cool dude, apparently, in real life. I like hearing stories about celebrities that are not like living in Hollywood and being all vapid, but are like, oh, I can be this super mega star, but then I just go off and retreat into the country. And Harrison Ford is the same way, and they're like, I'm just a grouchy old man on a ranch. Yeah, it's like that's how Hawkeye in the movie is.
I think Andrew had something to say about this series of Hawkeye.
Oh, yeah. I really love this book. I have used this book when, time comes in English class to fill out your reading log. Bro, I didn't read nothing this week. I'll whip out Matt Fraction's Hawkeye and write about that. Why are you making that face at me, Dad?
Why aren't you doing your reading for school?
Listen, Dad, I'm going to be real with you for a second. Mr. Hatcherday doesn't want to see that I read the Dungeon Master's Guide for 3 hours. That's not what he wants. He wants me to read the literature.
The literature of Matt Fraction's Hawkeye that you've read 12 times?
It's literature.
Andrew, I hope your literature teacher does not listen to this episode.
My English teacher can listen to this all he wants. Yo. Yo,
Teach.
Big HD. If you watching this, I love you, man.
Yo, Teach, I be on a podcast about literature stuff. Give me some extra credit.
Yeah, I don't need extra credit, bro. I'm acing that class. That's why he likes me.
Oh, boy.
No, yeah. Kate Bishop is like one of my favorite characters. She's really great. Anyway, back to what we were talking about.
Oh, you know what I like more about the show than the comic book? Even though I almost 100% like the comic book more than the show.
Yeah.
But the thing I like about the show better than the comic book is that the show doesn't have the weird hip windows in the costume.
That is good. That is
the hip windows are the dumbest things I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's bad. That's a not good part. It's like if you were eating a cake, but then like one part of the cake had like a really clear bite taken out of it. Like that really messes up how you look at that entire cake. It's like, that's a really good show. It's a really good comic, but like, why does she gotta have those hip windows? I thought that the second comic book I should talk about would be Doctor Strange by Jason Aaron. That's right, we got there, baby. Jason Aaron wrote Doctor Strange. I am recommending volumes 1 and 2. Volume 1 being The Way of the Weird, and Volume 2 being The Last Days of Magic, published from 2015 to 2016. Jason Aaron, you might remember him from writing Thor, the God Butcher, and the God Bomb. We just...
How about that?
What do you know?
I love that guy. Jason, he's my homie. In this book, I think really reinvents Doctor Strange as a character. Doctor Strange is kind of, it's weird to put in a story because he's very tropey, I think. He's very much like in your D&D game. You go to the wizard up in the tower, and he says, "Ooh, I have a special spell to help you, but I'll need 3 special ingredients first." And he's just kind of one note in that way. But what Jason Aaron does in this book, in order to make him more of a fleshed out character on his own, someone who might get multiple solo movies that are very good, he says, you know what? I'm going to make Doctor Strange swashbuckler Doctor Strange. And he is that very much, I think. That's how I view him. In this book, Doctor Strange is whipping all over the place. He's running around. He's cracking jokes. He's making out with weird brain parasite ladies in issue 1. Sometimes, things mess up. My boy runs out of spell slots. He just reaches into his pocket dimension, pulls out his battle axe, and just hacks through everything.
I was going to ask you, is this the one where he's got the battle axe and runs around slaying monsters?
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is good. Is this also the one where he gets power by eating weird things from extra dimensions?
It's where he opens up his fridge and he's just got a bunch of like eyeballs and tentacles in a bowl and he's eating them up with his chopsticks. It's really cool. And The Last Days of Magic is also very fun and also very interesting. And it highlights a bunch of other weird like wizards and magic users in the Marvel universe from a bunch of different places. I don't know if the Russian one rides a bear or is a bear, but it's one of those two.
Right?
Either way, I'm down for it.
Gosh, that's a cool book.
Yeah.
The one with all the other Sorcerer Supremes from the different cultures and stuff is really good.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun to see. I bet you in Doctor Strange 3, we see a bunch of those guys show up. They gotta.
I sure hope so, yeah.
I was going to say, this doesn't sound like anything they've put on the screen for Doctor Strange so far, but that doesn't mean it can't be.
I would say this is definitely the influence for Multiverse of Madness, where you've got the giant eyeball tentacle monsters destroying the city, and the idea of like, we have to go on a fetch quest to find the magic book and all that kind of stuff is very much... I think Multiverse of Madness, so far, we'll see when the new Dungeons & Dragons movie comes out, but as far as I'm concerned, the best Dungeons & Dragons movie that's ever come out was Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness.
Also, I didn't mention this, the art and the layouts of some of these pages are also very weird and like funky, and I think it's cool when you get to when you see some like really weird art, because Doctor Strange like goes to all these different places and meets all kind of weird creatures.
Does it do that thing where it plays with the panels in the gutters and like the monsters kind of spill? Am I remembering right that they kind of spill out onto the gutters with their tentacles and their like grossness to make it more visceral?
I think I do believe that is
because it's breaking through like in the story, it's breaking through the dimension, and then on the page, it's breaking out of the confines of the panel.
Yeah, it's a clever way to do something in the story, but then also like perfectly mirror it with the medium.
I mean, that might actually bump its way up to my next read, because that actually sounds right up my alley.
It's really good on Analese, especially like like you got to read volume 1 to get to volume 2, but if volume 2 is where all those other wizards are, like it's so cool.
And I haven't caught up to MCU yet to have watched the newest Doctor Strange. So I've heard nothing but
the newest Doctor Strange from 2018.
Yes,
What's the last MCU thing you've watched, Analese?
Podcast. You watched Loki, right?
I watched Loki. I finished What If.
Oh, good.
And I started watching something. What was after What If?
Spider-Man?
Spider-Man was before What If, wasn't it?
Whatever a spider can?
Let's see.
No, it's the Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi?
Shang-Chi. I started watching Shang-Chi and I've not finished it.
We gotta say Shang-Chi or they're gonna get mad at us.
Sorry, Shang-Chi?
Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi, and then I think Captain, and then Doctor Strange, right? No, I have them all over the place, but thankful to Disney Plus who puts them in order. I just go to Disney Plus and I go to phase 4 or whatever, and I just go to the next thing I haven't watched. So I don't have to worry about having a list anymore like we did when I first moved back 3 years ago and we were trying to catch me up on everything. I am behind.
Eternals is next for you.
Oh, Eternals. Oh, you actually told me to skip Eternals. So I'm going to skip Eternals.
Oh. Do that. We were right.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for it to come around and be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and so far, no.
Never.
Not if they didn't do a good job with it. No.
If you skip Eternals, then you're on Hawkeye, it's a bummer you couldn't have caught up earlier because Hawkeye's a Christmas movie.
Oh,
and
sure.
It's perfect to watch in December, but
yeah.
Then Spider-Man, then Moon Knight, then Doctor Strange.
But I saw Spider-Man. I saw Spider-Man with you guys in the theaters, remember?
Yeah, that's fine because he kind of does his own thing.
Yeah.
Like if I'm looking at Hawkeye, Thor, oh, maybe not Thor. I'm trying to think. There's kind of this running thing in the background with Yelena Belova and Elaine from Seinfeld, but they're not in every movie.
Yeah. I remember talking about Spider-Man, and I watched everything. Like you do the pre-work and what do you need to know going into the movie? And I remember catching up on everything that you found was applicable to Spider-Man. And then I asked you the same because I was going to skip and watch Doctor Strange, but you gave me a list that was a little bit longer and I didn't have time to catch up on it. And then Thor, just no time. And then, yeah. But What If took me a while to finish because I won't say I lost interest in the episodes, but I found some of them really hard to follow along and stay engaged with. But the last
show is a lot better if you've read the comic books that they reference.
Possibly. But I also know there's some moments in there that absolutely move on to the next parts of the phases. So, and I really enjoyed the zombie one. That was one of the last. I really, really, really liked that episode, but I had to watch it in chunks. I tried to watch it when I was sick and I kept falling asleep because I was not feeling well. So I'll catch up someday.
You know, Analese, I have a hypothetical what if question for you.
Okay.
What if you talked about the third and final comic book on your list?
Well played, Andrew. Well played. I will talk about the third on my list. Going along with women superheroes, I went with Miss Marvel. Now, this is one, Rob said he made a face. I'm going to read this little blurb when I did my research about Miss Marvel. It says, Miss Marvel is the name of several fictional superheroes appearing in comic books published by Marvel Comics. The character was originally conceived as a female counterpart to Captain Marvel. Like Captain Marvel, most of the bearers of the Miss Marvel title gain their powers through Kree technology or genetics. And it goes on to talk about the different versions of it. When I say the 60s for this one, it's because Miss Marvel was originally Carol Danvers' name before Marvel dies and she takes over as Captain Marvel. There's Sharon Ventura, who was given that title in the 70s, She-Thing. So she was a little bit of Miss Marvel from the 70s. And then you have Carla Sofin Moonstone, who was given that in the 80s. And then you have Kamala Khan.
Yeah. Now that's the one we're talking about.
That's right? The one I'm talking about.
Kamala Khan, Ms.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. So we're talking about.
We're talking about Sharon Moonstone or whatever you said.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm not here for that.
But they were all called Miss Marvel. So if you go and do some research about Miss Marvel particularly, you're not going to get to the Pakistani teen girl who becomes Miss Marvel in this latest version of Miss Marvel. But this is the most important version of it and a very big sign of the inclusionary storytelling that Marvel has really embraced in the last, I don't know, maybe 15 years. We can give them maybe 2 decades.
Called Marvel Now was might have been 2016, I want to say, when Marvel Now was somebody can write in and let me know when that really was.
Yeah.
But that's when the Marvel Now initiative took over. And that's where we saw so much of these revamps of the characters, including the Captain Marvel reboot, including the introduction of Ms. Marvel, a lot of younger superheroes, a lot of people of color getting more of a spotlight and titles.
And the Eternals was kind of under that umbrella as well, right? Or the Runaways. I'm sorry. The Runaways is a Marvel comic that
The Runaways
was
is definitely
featured.
a Marvel comic.
Yeah.
I don't know if they had a Marvel Now treatment or not.
They may not have, but what is poignant in Runaways is that you do have different socioeconomic, you have different ethnicities. And that's really what I'm talking about more than the umbrella of Marvel Now. Marvel itself has done work to become more inclusionary visually and storytelling wise and background story wise. And that's what's really intriguing about Miss Marvel. The comic is Miss Marvel No Normal from 2013. It is written by G. Willow Wilson. The art is great. The depiction of a Pakistani family in America and a first generation teen girl raised with Pakistani family values, and then having the mysterious fog give her superpowers and what she does with it, and that whole story. And I understand the series was great. I have not watched the series yet. That it was very entertaining. I mean, it's really ticking off people who don't like diversity in their comics and entertainment. And I really love that. In the same way, I love that people are all got their panties bunched up about the backstory of Velma on HBOMax right now, voiced by, why am I blanking on her name?
Mindy Kaling?
Yes. Thank you.
Let's go!
Dude! Mindy Kaling. Yes. Good job, Andrew. So in the same way that people are all in a rise about a Velma backstory series, it's animated, it's on HBO Max, it's voiced by Mindy Kaling. People are just upset about it because they gave Velma a non-Caucasian American storyline before she meets the Scooby Gang, and people are all crazy about it. But I love it. I love the inclusionary piece to it. I love, again, they've given that traditional, oops, something happened to me and I'm going to become a superhero to a non-white female teen. And the comic itself is just so good.
It is really good. It's super well written. The show is adorable. What a wonderful family piece that has a ton of heart. I was just thinking as you were talking about Marvel Now, we saw Miles Morales Spider-Man took a big role in that Defenders series that really launched it. Amadeus Cho as the totally awesome Hulk. You have Ms. Marvel in there, Kamala Khan. I will say you also have America Chavez in that group too. And I hated the America Chavez comics. They were just not good, which is a shame, but they could not decide what they were doing with that character. Movie America Chavez? A zillion times better than comic book America Chavez. That was one of those ones where I saw, oh, America Chavez is going to be in this movie. I haven't read that one yet. I'm going to go back and read it. And I was like, oh God, this is bad. And then I saw her in the movie and I was like, oh, I love her. Very similar to, I would say Namor. Comic book Namor has always just been a loser. He stinks. And they revamped Namor in the cinematic universe.
It is me. They call me Namor.
Yeah. Instead of a Speedo wearing, loser with wings on his ankles, he's the king of the sea Mexicans?
Sea Aztecs.
Aztecs. It's really good. It doesn't sell it. It's super good.
He wears boxers now, right?
Ms. Marvel is a really good book.
Yes.
And nothing that we have said in the last 30 seconds should influence you away from it. It is a great book. It is a great show. The thing that's funny about Ms. Marvel is they can't decide what they want to do with her. When her origin in this book that you're talking about, she's an Inhuman, right? The Terrigen Mist comes and she's activated into an Inhuman. But then Marvel was like, we're not doing the Inhuman thing anymore. So instead, she's just a scientific experiment kind of thing, like the Hulk or whatever. But then, you get to the show and they're like, oh, well, we're going to bring mutants back. So she's a mutant now. So that's kind of weird. The continuity is kind of funky there, but it doesn't take away from the core of who that character is. Just adorkable.
Yeah.
She's wonderful.
This is the one comic book on your list, Analese, that I've read, and it's a comic book I've put on my reading log, so that's how you know it's got that.
Didn't
Andrew
you say
Cooper.
your dad made you read the Captain Marvel one? You gave us a whole story about your Switch being knocked out of your hand and then spat on so that you can read Captain Marvel. So I'm going to call you out on that one.
That did happen, but then I said, actually, this was really good. I want to read it again. And then I read 15 volumes.
There is something to be said about understanding cultural differences in the fictional storyline of someone gaining superpowers for however reason, whatever reason, human or inhuman, the cultural differences of what it's like for that person to then go home and try to live a normal family life. That's, as a person of color myself, is important to read. If I were a teen that suddenly gained superpowers, my ability to go home and have this secret identity would have been wholly different than a Spider-Man who lives with his, 2 generations away great aunt and uncle,
widowed aunt for most of it, right?
And the widow aunt for pieces of it, it's different than Superman who comes to, and Batman who's a full-grown multimillionaire adult and just known to be eccentric, so he can come and go as he please. And Superman hides his stuff with the guise of with the help of his adoptive parents until he's an adult himself and can come and go as please. So there's just these cultural differences that are now part of the storylines, and it's very exciting to see.
It's funny how going back to the roots is actually different and laudable now. We have so many superheroes that come from, there's a tragic parental backstory, that having a superhero with a nice family is actually very rare. But it all goes back to Superman. Superman had a very nice family with a loving, support system who knew about his superhero-ness. Now, when I'm looking at a Miles Morales or a Kamala Khan, it's a little different because they're in that teenage kind of sense, but it goes back around to that original story. And it's like, oh, it's so refreshing because we don't have to have this edgy backstory for our superheroes. They can be, what did the kids say? Wholesome 100?
Yeah, Miles Morales gets so much red and gold.
All right.
And Miles Morales was brilliant in the Spider-Verse animated movie. I mean, talk about cultural. I know. But the cultural relevancy for Miles Morales as a African American and Latinx character, it's just phenomenal the way that was all done.
That's actually the one thing I dislike about Miles Morales' portrayal in the Insomniac Spider-Man games, is that in the first one, his dad, he dies. He gets killed by Mr. Negative or something. And I think that's not very cool.
I totally agree. I think one of the things that makes Miles Morales so awesome is he's got a nice family.
Yeah.
And so of course the video game did that easy tropey thing of we need a motivation for this character. Kill his beloved family member to motivate him. It's so tired.
But hey, speaking of dead parents, why don't you talk about Batman?
Yeah, this is not a Marvel list. This is a comic book list, and I'm going to talk about Batman.
Well, maybe DC can do better with female comics. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, Batman, go ahead.
Well, great segue, because the reason why I have Detective Comics Volume 1 Rise of the Batman on my list is because this Batman story brings on an entire cast of characters, both male and female, lots of young blood, lots of new characters to the Batman story. There's definitely 2 ways that writers go with Batman. Sometimes he's just the gritty loner detective alone in the streets and up on the rooftops, and that's the story of, one man versus a city of crime. And sometimes they just lean into the Bat family, where there's a Nightwing and there's a Robin and there's the other guy who used to be Robin and there's a Batgirl and there's also his cousin, the Batwoman. And then and this is what this story does, but it brings in some new characters. You've got Spotlight, right, which is Duke, yeah, and he's got his own troubles and adjustments he needs to make into the superhero limelight. There's Cassandra Cain is in there fighting crime, and she's got this love relationship going on with Tim Drake Robin. Nightwing is in there sometimes too. My favorite characters in this book, though, are Orphan, which was a character that was new to me before I read this series, who is just awesome. Now that I know you've seen it, Analese, she's the River Song character of this cadre. She's quiet and mysterious and she's very sweet. Like, I think it's so similar. I think there's a scene of her like hiding in the rafters of like a ballet performance, watching the dancers, and like goes home and she's mimicking perfectly the dancing and stuff because she loves the art, and she doesn't speak very much. And when she does, it's kind of mysterious. And then when the bad guys show up, she brutally murders everybody with absolutely no remorse. And it's really cool there. And then the other character,
isn't Cassandra Cain orphan?
No.
I thought they were the same.
No, Cassandra Cain is the one that's wearing like the pink and black outfit with the...
That's Bluebird.
In the pink?
She wears blue. She has the pink mohawk.
And she's in love with Tim Drake.
I don't think Orphan ever had a love interest.
No, Orphan definitely did not have a love interest.
Right.
Do I have it all confused?
Look it up. Is Orphan not? I thought Orphan was Cassandra Cain.
Oh, maybe you're right, and I just got the name wrong. Gosh darn it. Nerd corrections in real time.
That's true. I should have left the list. My bad.
Cassandra Cain is a superhero appearing in American comic books. Well, okay, keep going. Oh, shoot, you're absolutely right. Cassandra Cain is Orphan. So who is the one I was talking about earlier?
Look up Bluebird, DC.
Spoiler. I'm thinking of Spoiler.
You're thinking of Spoiler. She's purple.
She's pink. What? Yeah,
That's
whatever.
purple.
Okay. So,
okay.
You got Spoiler, who's got the love interest with Tim Drake, and he's like working on the system, and he wants to make a suit of armor around the world, and there's a whole dichotomy on there. And then there's Cassandra Cain, which was Orphan, the one I was just telling you about. And then there's another character that really rounds out the group, and it's a very interesting thing, and it's Clayface. The bad guy, Clayface, is part of the group, trying to do better, trying to fight the madness that has overcome him because of his hideous transformation. Batman helps him, of course, with like scientific devices so that he can control himself better, and he becomes part of the team. Is he ever trusted by the rest of the group? How is he lovable? And how does his turn work? How does he tries to live between two worlds of the Bat family and the villain family. Just a really cool dynamic and tons of depth in the character of Clayface.
I read this one. That's why I was able to pwn you so hard.
Yes.
Like epic nerd corrections.
Yeah.
But I read this and it's also very good. And also all of these guys are in the Batman game that we have with all the minis that you painted.
Ooh, yes, we talked about Batman Gotham Chronicles, the big miniature game by Monolith that we paint. It's a really fun skirmish game. The scenarios are okay, but they're kind of hard and like convoluted. But when you just like draft up your Gotham City skirmish force and go head to head, it's a really fun game.
This Detective Comics Volume 1, is it just that one volume? How many are you reading?
It goes for a long time.
Okay. To get to all those characters, right?
Yeah, and they have tons of room as the series goes on and it gets thicker and thicker. All of those characters have more space to breathe and develop. So start with Volume 1 and see if you like it. But I maybe read all of them. And if this is one of those ones, I get all my DC comics on Hoopla, which is free from your local library. And it just tear through them digitally. One of those ones where it's like, oh, I got to the end and I'm starting the next one right away because the characters are new. The stories are different. It's a whole different vibe to Gotham and that Batman universe.
Andrew, what about your third?
I also said, you know what? I can't have a list of 3 Marvel comic books. So I said, you know what? We're going back to everyone's favorite set of teenagers who are also mutants and also ninjas and also usually turtles. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Written by Tom Waltz and Kevin Eastman. Guys, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird are still alive.
It was the 90s when they came, or maybe
Ninja Turtles isn't that old.
I thought they were dead, dude. It was wild. But no, they're still alive and hopefully healthy.
Are you like Gen Z? Are you Gen No Alphabet because we already got to Z?
I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. I'm going to recommend volumes 1 through 8, published from 2018 to 2019. Everybody loves the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're great. This book is really fun. It's dynamic. It's action-packed. All of the characters in this book are distinct. They're interesting on their own. They each have their own sort of things going on. I think that's especially hard to do with the turtles themselves. Sometimes some of them can feel like some are more interesting than the other, but it goes really well. You can tell them apart, especially in Volume 1. They do the thing where they all have red masks. It's still very easy to tell them apart even when they're not holding their signature weapons.
That's well-written dialogue to do that. For sure.
You can read Volume 1 change is constant. I would recommend reading up through Volume 8, which is Northampton. There's like a bajillion volumes of this book because they keep cranking them out. I think that it's weird that every Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles adaptation has to follow the same format, where in the beginning they introduce all the characters, and then it's either the Foot or the Krang does like some really big scheme. The Foot does a big scheme, and then the Technodrome shows up, and they say, well, we gotta go out into the wilderness for a bit and hide away. So they go out into the wilderness and then say, alright, it's time to come back and tear things up. And they come back and tear things up, and then they're in space with Triceratops. I don't need all that. Read through Volume 8. Volume 8 takes you through City Fall, which is the sort of big event thing. And then Northampton is when they go up to the cabin in the woods. Very nice. I like the art. The turtles are very cute with their small heads and big ol' hands. And I like it, and I like to read up to Volume 8 and then pretend that that's where the story ends. Like nothing else ever happened.
I'm the same way with the original, like, Eastman and Laird Turtles. It's like, man, Volume 1 is so good, and Volume 2 is really good. And then, you know, if you see them start to go into space and stuff, you've gone too far.
I'm glad you mentioned this in the way you introduced it, Andrew, that, you know, you wanted to get away from Marvel superheroes. I think it can be said with a question mark, are the Ninja Turtles superheroes? And I mentioned that, I bring that up because we did have a conversation about honorable mentions, which we're not going to get to in the episode. We also had a conversation about some question marks that we could have included on our list. I think about Buffy. Is Buffy a superhero? I don't know. It's questionable. She could be. There's Chew. Both the male and female versions of Chew. Are they superheroes? Something happened to them and they have these superpowers. They use them for good or not good. I think it's very...
Usagi Yojimbo a superhero?
Right, exactly. So I think we have more to say in this subject area, particularly with these question marks. I'm really glad you included the Ninja Turtles because I don't know, when you hear the word superhero, I definitely went with the like wearing tight clothing and capes and experiment gone wrong or some other influence to make them superheroes or from another planet, fish out of water. It was kind of 5 of the 6. And so I'm really glad you brought this one up, Andrew.
I mean, like, they're a group of people who get weird abilities due to a science experiment gone wrong, and then they dress up in color-coded masks, and then they go beat up ninjas and aliens and robot bodies.
Fight crime.
They fight crime. I think they're pretty solidly superheroes. Maybe probably with more of a street-level vigilante lean to them, but I think they're solidly.
Yep, 100%. We could go on forever. There are a million wonderful and great comic books. We'll either save it for next season or something else because Analese very strictly said, hey, I'm not going to edit a 4-hour episode. There's not going to be any more than 3 and there's no honorable mentions. So when we're done, we're done. And we're done. But I bet there's a bunch of way cool comic books out there, superhero comic books that have influenced you, that, you know, influenced awesome pop culture things for this one that really fall in line with like the traditional superhero characters. And we want to know what they are, what we forgot, what you would add to our list, what would be on your list, things you can't believe Rob didn't mention this, knowing what you know about me after 29 episodes of the show. Can't wait to hear it.
You know, Dad.
Yeah.
Writing into the podcast sounds like a pretty nerdy thing to do. In fact, if I wrote into the podcast, I might say that was the nerdiest thing I did all week.
What are you trying to say, Andrew?
Well, Dad, hypothetically, if you were on a podcast, which I know you would never do because you hate that idea.
Right.
And someone asked you, hey, what's the nerdiest thing you did this week? What answer do you think you would give them?
The nerdiest thing I did this week was I created my own paint guide for miniature painting based on the paint brands that are available in my local area so that I could see what name of the color was the same color for multiple different companies. So like there's a shade of brown, but this company calls it this company calls it this, and this company calls it a third thing. Now I've got a spreadsheet, a color-coded spreadsheet, of course, where all three of those names
coded.
are listed next to each other so that you know, oh, I used burnt sienna number 2 from this on that, and I really like the way it looked, but I'm out of burnt sienna number 2. Oh, but I have gorgon toenail, and that's the exact same color because I referenced my sheet. I'll just use that because that's what I've got. Or sometimes you like paints in different mediums. Like some people like paint pots, some people like squeeze bottles, some people find that the consistency or thickness of a paint from one manufacturer is different than the other. You want that color, but I don't want it in the form of a thick base paint from this company. I want it in a thinner highlight color from another company. Now I have that spreadsheet to do it. So I referenced about 2 or 3 paint guides that I found on the internet, but customized it for me and you, Analese, and our other painting friends in our area with the paints that are like readily available in our surrounding areas.
It is a very nerdy chart, although it has proven to be useful. I will say. There you go. How about you, Andrew? What's the nerdiest thing you did this week?
It's kind of like a heist, you see. Everyone on this podcast brings their own skills and talents and expertise to the table. And I think what I bring to the table, most of all, is that I'm the only theater nerd you've got on the podcast. I'm the only one here who's really a thespian. Or if not, I'm the only one here who, at the extent, would call themselves a thespian. And so is related, trust me, dear listener, it's related to the nerdiest thing I did this week. Because my musical theater, the 2 classes, got to go on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity chance to go to the most magical place on earth where a kid can be a kid, Disneyland. But we didn't just go to Disneyland. No. How tame. How pedestrian. No. We had to go into the back of Disneyland. We went behind Space Mountain.
You went way beyond.
I went in the back. I went in the back where you see the big things in the sky are actually 2-dimensional, and you can see the wooden things holding them up. Because we went to Imagination Campus, and they took our 2 classes in here, and they said, all right, we are going to be performing a song from the Disney movie Tangled. We are going to teach you your vocal parts. You are going to audition. We are going to give you choreography. We are going to give you blocking, and you're going to be ready to perform it in 3 hours. We did just that through trial and error. We worked hard. We got that done. It was around 1 o'clock, and our teacher said, all right, cool. You can just be at Disneyland now. Meet back here at 8. And we went wild. We painted Fantasy Town red, if you know what I'm saying.
You did graffiti at Disneyland? They'll throw you in Disney jail.
I'm too quick for the Disneyland po-po. They can't catch me. I'm so cool. I'm like I'm West Side Story, baby. That's a musical. I know musicals.
The only way that would possibly be true is if somehow the hot pursuit from the Disney police force was based upon making transitions in a podcast. That would be the only situation in which I believe that you could escape them.
What if I have joy in my heart? What if I believe?
Who's Joy?
What?
How'd you get in there? Was it one of those like systems where they shrunk down the ship and entered your bloodstream?
Oh, were you also in the Ant-Man special and the Wasp, and then they found someone named Joy to volunteer, and now she's stuck?
Yeah, actually, I got early, while we were there at Disney, we got early access to Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Mm-hmm. And in this one, I'm actually in it. I got to guest star in it. Yeah. Ant-Man gets all big, and I say,
you play, what, shoot, is her name also Cassandra? Now I just have Cassandra on my mind.
Oh, his daughter?
Yeah.
Cassie?
Yeah,
I play Cassie.
Cassandra for like Cassandra's boyfriend Andrew in one scene.
Yeah.
You're like standing behind on the door, and Cassie walks in, and then Paul Rudd slams the door in your face, and you're never seen again in the whole movie.
That's amazing.
And then what I do is actually I'm facing the door, and then I turn around and I look directly into the camera. And I say, was it something I said? And then the laugh track plays.
Oh, wow.
They use the laugh track a lot in this movie.
Can I say, just a side note, giant Ant-Man zombie in What If was freaking terrifying.
Pretty rad, right?
Yeah.
Freaking terrifying. And that's the one thing I thought, I'm like, oh no. Or was that wasn't Ant-Man. That was the Wasp, right? She was the one that got all giant.
Yeah,
or was it
Ant-Man was the head.
Ant-Man was, yeah. But I was like, no. She's going to come back. Terrifying. Anyways, go on, Andrew. You painted it red. You didn't get caught by Disney police. You did a cameo in the newest Ant-Man, and you looked in the camera and want. And then what happened?
And then we drove back, got home around 1 o'clock, hit the sack, and woke up bright and early because, dear listener, I live a very, very busy life. And so that very same day, I had a matinee performance that I was in, dancing in the dance corps for a musical. That's a reference to another musical within a musical joke, because I know musicals. Laugh.
Analese,
did you mess up your choreography and accidentally do your Tangled choreography in the middle of your other show?
No, that would have been hard to do on roller skates.
Or incredibly easy to. I'm sorry, Rob, you were asking a question.
What's the nerdiest thing you did this week, Analese?
I'm going to let Andrew have the thespian comment because I'm long retired, but nerdiest thing I did this week, Mansions of Madness Edition 2. And I've been waiting for a chance to play the game. And I finally got to play it. Since our last recording, I finally, 3 years into a pandemic, finally got the COVID and found myself pretty sick. And one of the days where I felt decent enough to get up and move around, I decided to take the game out and just not sit around and watch television. It is so good. It is another app-based game. You can solo play. When you solo play, you're still playing two characters, which is a lot of thought thinking through two characters, but not undoable because it's not role-playing. So you're not necessarily trying to say, what would this character do? You're just trying to go in and solve the thing. The app tells a story, like an animated story as you go along.
Oh, cool.
The interactions are great. You can do a little more free-based things than Dark Tower in that, like, there might be some NPGs that you can approach and decide to talk to, and depending on when that is or where they are, can change their interactions with you. You have a choice, like a choose your own adventure, what you're going to say to them, and that can determine whether or not they work with you or work against you. It is so good. And then come to find out, I mean, this game's old enough. They have multiple expansion packs. I'm so geekily into this game, and I can't wait to have them. I'm really looking forward to having a multiplier game with you and Andrew and who it can play up to 5 players. So all of us can play if we want to.
That's awesome.
Oh,
yeah. And it's got the Cthulhu's and the cultists.
Oh yeah. I got just handed one by double Cthulhu's and not getting to the seance in time, so that the house started ripping apart, and like I just failed my first time. I lost, but it was so fun. It was just so fun. It was such a good game. I'm looking forward to saving up and finding myself the expansions at some point.
Awesome. I think there's a lot of grognard skepticism about games that need an app to play, but I've never played a game that had an app that wasn't better for it.
Yeah, it's giving you a GM without needing to designate someone as the GM. And it does it in a way that algorithms, instead of a human thinking those decisions through, I just think there's a lot of benefits to it. Obviously, as a solo play, there's a lot of benefits to it. Like Final Girl was really fun playing by myself, and that was drawing a card for the villains for the the GM turn, and that was still really good. This one just takes out the mechanics of drawing a card. It's going to tell you, boom, this is what's happening, and you have to react to it. So it's kind of like playing a video game, but you have the board game in front of you.
But you painted the miniatures, and there's a tactile experience, and you're thinking through a little bit more, and all the benefits of a tabletop game and kind of the hobby and craft that goes into it. That sounds awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, it is so good. It's so fun. And any listeners who have not played this game, get it. Get a chance to. It is so good and so worth it. And the app does not make it anything but more fun. Andrew, it's always so much fun to have you on the show. Your wit and teenage sarcasm is always a fun time, and your knowledge of the things is why we bring you on to the shows. So it's not just a couple of old people talking about what we like, but you bringing some good
relevance.
Ideas to the table.
Yeah.
Relevance is a good word. Yes. So
Also,
thanks again for being on the show, Andrew.
You gotta have someone on the show that's funny. Otherwise, why would people watch?
Nobody. It's a podcast.
But it's on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube.
Annalese, thank you, Andrew.
Hey, it's on YouTube, by the way. If you wanted to experience it in a different format, you could go to youtube.com and find the Nerd Best Friends.
Subscribe now.
Everywhere you want to be.
Yep. Hit that bell icon so you get them noties.
Annalese, I really enjoyed the episode where we had Allison on talking about cosplay and her experience at LA Comic Con. I learned so much from that episode and thought it was really cool that we could have a guest of that's out there in a nerd community doing great things. And I think I'm looking forward to next week when we're going to be doing something similar. We've got a pinball wizard that just competed in the inaugural California Women's State Pinball Championship, and that's going to be our guest next week, and our show will be wrapped around that interview. I'm very stoked.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation with her, ranked in the top 100 in North America.
Remember to subscribe, share, and give us that 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and now TikTok at Nerd Best Friends, or send a message by writing to podcast@nerdbestfriends.com.
Well, thanks again, Andrew, and thanks, nerds. Thanks, Rob. We read some comic books, talked about our favorite heroes. Now let's go do the things.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
See ya. If you want to Lin-Manuel
You
Miranda,
can't talk because we haven't introduced you yet. You're not in the podcast.
You know what? That's my bad.
Congratulations.
So wait,
You're the blooper.
Yay. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I allowed to speak now?
Yes, you can be on the podcast now.
Oh, thank you, Father.
Listeners, if you haven't noted, Andrew is a little bit older since the first time he has appeared on the podcast. Hence, the teen sarcasm has risen to level 10.
Yes. You know, if it weren't for this podcast, no one would believe you had friends.